The stars had always been peaceful for the Velorai. For 10,000 years, they had traveled between worlds, building stations and colonies, making friends with dozens of alien species. They were a gentle people. Their bodies were covered in soft silver fur, and they walked on four legs like the great deer of ancient Earth. Their eyes were large and dark, placed on the sides of their heads so they could see danger coming from any direction. They were prey animals who had learned to reach the stars, and they were proud of their peaceful ways. Then they discovered humanity. Ambassador Cathari remembered the first time he saw footage of Earth. He had been a young student then, sitting in a classroom with 30 other Velorai children. Their teacher had dimmed the lights and shown them images from the newly discovered planet. The children had screamed. The humans in the footage had eyes that faced forward, like hunters. They had flat faces and exposed teeth. They moved with a strange, confident walk that spoke of predators who feared nothing. But worst of all were the images of human history. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could destroy entire cities. Violence that seemed to have no end. These creatures call themselves intelligent, their teacher had said, her voice shaking. They have technology. They have cities. But look at what they do to each other. Look at what they are. The Galactic Council had classified humans as apex horrors after that. It was the most dangerous classification any species could receive. It meant that humans were to be watched, contained, and never trusted. Most species in the galaxy agreed with this decision. Humans were monsters wearing the skin of civilized beings. That had been 40 years ago. Cathari was now one of the most respected ambassadors in the Velorai Dominion. He had negotiated peace treaties with a dozen species. He had calmed tensions that could have led to wars. He was known for his wisdom and his calm nature, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He stood in his private office aboard the diplomatic vessel Serenity's Grace, reading the message from the High Council for the third time. His four legs trembled beneath him. "A human cultural attach," he whispered. "They want me to bring a human aboard my ship." The message explained that Earth had requested closer diplomatic ties with the Velorai Dominion. The humans wanted to prove they were not the monsters everyone believed them to be. As a gesture of good faith, they had asked to send a single representative to live and work alongside the Velorai. The High Council had agreed. They believed it was better to watch humans closely than to let them act without supervision. And they had chosen Cathari's ship for this experiment. "Because I am expendable," Cathari said bitterly. "Because if this goes wrong, they lose only one old ambassador and his crew." He closed his eyes and thought of the 12 cubs aboard his vessel. The Serenity's Grace was a family ship, carrying not just diplomats but their partners and children as well. The cubs played in the corridors and learned their lessons in the ship's school. They were innocent and trusting and had never known fear. Soon, they would live alongside a predator. The human arrived 3 days later. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. Cathari watched through a security screen as she stepped off the transport shuttle and into his ship's docking bay. She was smaller than he had expected. Humans in the footage always seemed so large and threatening, but Elena Vasquez was short and slim. Her skin was brown, and her hair was black and pulled back from her face. She wore simple clothes and soft colors, and she carried only a small bag of belongings. Then she looked up, and Cathari saw her eyes. They were brown, warm, and facing directly forward. Hunter's eyes. Predator's eyes. Even from a distance, through a screen, he felt the ancient fear rise in his chest. His instincts screamed at him to run, to hide, to protect the young. He forced himself to walk to the docking bay. Elena smiled when she saw him. Her lips pulled back, and he saw her teeth. They were white and flat, but the two on either side of the front ones were slightly pointed. Canine teeth. Mate-eaten teeth. Ambassador Cathari, she said. Her voice was soft and warm. Thank you so much for welcoming me aboard. I know this must be difficult for your people, and I want you to know that I deeply appreciate the opportunity. She extended her hand, palm up, in the Valori greeting. She had studied their customs. She was trying to make him comfortable. It did not work. Dr. Vasquez, Cathari said, keeping his voice steady. Welcome to the Serenity's Grace. I will show you to your quarters. He walked quickly, keeping her behind him where he could not see her, but where his instincts told him a predator lurked. He heard her footsteps following. They were soft, almost silent. Hunters walked quietly. The crew members they passed pressed themselves against the walls. Some of them trembled. A young mother grabbed her cub and pulled him into a side room, closing the door behind her. Cathari heard the child asking why they were hiding. Elena saw all of this. Cathari glanced back once and saw something in her predator eyes that looked almost like pain. But he told himself he was imagining it. Monsters did not feel pain at the fear of others. Monsters enjoyed it. He brought her to a small cabin at the edge of the ship, far from the family quarters where the cubs lived. This will be your space, he said. I must ask you to stay in this section of the ship unless you are escorted. For the safety of our crew. Elena nodded slowly. I understand. May I ask one question? Cathari's fur stood on end. Yes. Is there anything I can do to help your people feel safer around me? I could wear different clothes. I could keep my eyes lowered. Anything that might help. He stared at her. The question seemed genuine. She seemed to truly want to make them comfortable. But he remembered the footage. He remembered the wars, the weapons, the millions of dead. Just stay in your section, Dr. Vasquez, he said. That is all I ask. He left her there alone and walked back to his office. His hearts were pounding. His fur was damp with fear sweat. Monster was living on his ship. All he could do now was wait and watch, and pray to the old gods that she never showed her true nature. 3 weeks passed aboard the Serenity's Grace, and Elena Vasquez learned what it meant to be truly alone. She had studied alien cultures her entire adult life. She had lived among species that breathed methane, species that communicated through color changes in their skin, species that found the smell of humans deeply unpleasant. She had always found ways to connect, to build bridges, to make friends. The Valori would not let her try. Every morning, she ate her meals alone in her small cabin. Every afternoon, she worked on her research in the tiny office they had given her, reading documents about Valori culture and history. Every evening, she walked through the few corridors she was allowed to access, hoping to meet someone who might speak with her. No one did. The crew members she encountered would press themselves against the walls and wait for her to pass. If she said hello, they would answer in quick, frightened voices and then hurry away. If she smiled, they would look at her teeth, and their large eyes would fill with terror. After the first week, Elena stopped smiling. After the second week, she stopped saying hello. She understood their fear. She had read the reports about how prey species viewed humans. She knew that her forward-facing eyes looked like a predator's gaze to them. She knew that her teeth reminded them of hunters and killers. She knew that human history gave them every reason to be afraid, but understanding their fear did not make the loneliness easier to bear. One night, she sat in her cabin and looked at photographs from Earth, her mother and father standing in their garden, her sister holding her newborn baby, her friends from university laughing at a party years ago. All of them were billions of kilometers away, and she was here, surrounded by people who saw her as a monster. Maybe they're right, she whispered to herself. Maybe I don't belong here. She was seriously considering asking to return home when everything changed. It happened on a quiet afternoon in the 4th week of her stay. Elena was walking through a corridor near the cargo bay, one of the few areas she was allowed to visit without an escort. She heard a sound that made her stop, crying, a child crying. She followed the sound to a ventilation shaft near the floor. The cover had been removed, and she could see that the shaft was dark and narrow. The crying was coming from inside. Elena got down on her knees and looked into the shaft. She saw a small shape huddled about 2 meters inside. A Valorei cub, tiny and trembling, with silver fur and big wet eyes. "Hello there," Elena said softly. "Are you stuck?" The cub's crying stopped. 2 large eyes stared at her from the darkness. "Please don't eat me," the cub whispered. Elena felt her heart break a little. "I'm not going to eat you, sweetheart. I'm not going to hurt you at all. What's your name?" "Tala." The cub's voice was very small. "I was playing hide and seek with my friends. I hid in here, but now I can't get out. The walls are too close and I can't turn around." Elena looked at the shaft. It was narrow, but she thought she could fit. "Okay, Tila, I'm going to come in and get you. Is that all right?" Silence. Then, very quietly, "You won't hurt me?" "I promise. I would never hurt you." Elena pulled off her jacket and set it aside. She got down on her stomach and began to crawl into the shaft. It was tight and uncomfortable, and the metal pressed against her shoulders on both sides. But she kept moving forward, speaking softly to Tila the whole time. "I'm almost there. You're being so brave. Just a little bit more." She reached the cub. Tila was pressed against the corner where 2 shafts met, her 4 legs folded beneath her and her ears flat against her head. Her whole body was shaking. "There you are," Elena said gently. "I'm going to pick you up now, okay? Then I'll carry you out. You just hold on to me." She carefully lifted the cub. Tila was light and warm, and her fur was softer than anything Elena had ever felt. She cradled the child against her chest and began the slow, difficult process of crawling backward through the shaft. It took several minutes. Elena's elbows scraped against the metal, and her back ached from the awkward position. But she kept talking to Tila, telling her about Earth, about the flowers in her mother's garden, about the ocean and the mountains and the stars. Finally, they emerged into the corridor. Elena sat up and held Tila in her arms. The cub was still shaking, but she was no longer crying. "You're safe now," Elena said. "Everything is okay." Tila looked up at her. The cub's large dark eyes met Elena's brown ones. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. "Your eyes are different," Tila said quietly. "Everyone says your eyes are scary, but they don't look scary to me. They look warm." Elena felt tears prick at her own eyes. "Thank you, Tila. That's the kindest thing anyone has said to me in a long time." She picked up her jacket and wrapped it around the cub. Tila burrowed into the soft fabric, making a small sound of contentment. "Let's get you back to your mother," Elena said. She carried Tila through the corridors, following the directions the cub gave her. They reached the family quarters, and Elena saw a female Valorei standing in a doorway, her eyes wild with fear and worry. "Tila!" the mother screamed. She ran forward and snatched her daughter from Elena's arms. She held the cub tightly, her whole body trembling. Then she looked at Elena with an expression of pure terror. "What did you do to her?" the mother demanded. "What did you do?" "Mama, no," Tila said. "She saved me. I was stuck in the vent, and she came in and got me. She was nice to me." The mother stared at Elena. Her fear was still there, deep and ancient, written in every line of her body. But there was something else now. Confusion, uncertainty. "Thank you," she finally said. The words seemed to cost her a great effort. "Thank you for saving my daughter." Then she turned and carried Tila away, disappearing into the family quarters. Elena stood alone in the corridor. Her jacket was gone, still wrapped around the cub. Her elbows were bleeding from the shaft. Her heart was full of emotions she could not name as she walked back to her cabin. She did not know that Tila was already telling everyone who would listen about the kind human with the warm eyes. She did not know that everything was about to change. The days that followed were different. Elena still ate her meals alone and still worked in her tiny office. But now, when she walked through the corridors, not everyone ran away. Some of the crew members nodded to her. A few even said hello. The change was small, but Elena felt it like sunshine after a long winter. Tela had spread the story of her rescue across the entire ship. The cub told everyone about the human who had crawled into the dark shaft to save her. She told them about Elena's warm eyes and gentle voice. She told them about the soft jacket that had been wrapped around her. Not everyone believed. Many Velaray still crossed to the other side of the corridor when Elena approached. Cathari still watched her with suspicious eyes during their brief meetings. But the fear was no longer absolute. Some people were beginning to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, this human was not a monster after all. Elena allowed herself to hope. Then, the alarms began. It started with a low rumble that Elena felt through the floor of her cabin. She had been reading a report about Velaray family structures when the ship shook beneath her. The lights flickered once, twice, and then emergency red replaced the normal white glow. A voice came through the speakers. It was Captain Varth, his usually calm tone now sharp with fear. All crew to emergency stations. This is not a drill. We have a cascade failure in the main reactor. All crew to emergency stations immediately. Elena jumped to her feet. She had been trained in emergency procedures before coming aboard. She knew she was supposed to go to the escape pod bay near her section and wait for further instructions. But something made her hesitate. The family quarters. The cubs. They were on the other side of the ship. She ran out of her cabin and headed for the nearest information terminal. The screen showed a diagram of the ship, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The reactor was in the center of the vessel, and it was failing in the worst possible way. Massive amounts of radiation were pouring into the corridors around it. Temperatures in those sections were rising fast, already reaching levels that would kill any living thing. And the failure was spreading, section by section. Like a fire consuming dry wood. Emergency bulkheads had slammed down across the ship, sealing off damaged areas to protect the rest. But in doing so, they had trapped part of the crew. Elena looked at the diagram and felt her heart stop. The nursery deck was sealed off. The section where the youngest cubs spent their days, playing and learning and sleeping, was cut off from the rest of the ship. The corridors leading to it were flooded with radiation and heat. The bulkheads had trapped them inside. 12 cubs. 12 children. Dying alone in the dark. Elena ran. She reached the main gathering area near the escape pods and found chaos. Velaray crew members were crying, screaming, trying to reach terminals to find their families. Captain Varth was shouting orders, trying to maintain some control over the disaster. And in the middle of it all, Elena saw Kethari. The ambassador stood before a sealed bulkhead door. His paws were pressed against the metal, and his entire body was shaking. Behind that door, down those burning corridors, were the trapped cubs. Elena pushed through the crowd and reached him. "The children," she said. "They're trapped in there?" Kethari turned to look at her. His eyes were wet with tears. "The nursery deck is completely sealed. The corridors between here and there are flooded with radiation. The temperature has reached 400 degrees in some sections. Any Velaray who tries to pass through will die in seconds. How long do the cubs have?" "The nursery deck has its own life support, but the heat is spreading. Perhaps 20 minutes before it becomes too hot for them to survive. Perhaps less." Elena looked at the sealed door. She thought about the radiation, the heat, the distance. She thought about what those things would do to a human body. Then she thought about Tilla, about her soft fur and her big eyes, and the way she had said that Elena's eyes looked warm. "I can do it?" Elena said. Cathari stared at her. "What?" "Humans are more resistant to radiation than Velorai. We can survive higher temperatures. Not forever, not without damage, but for a short time. Long enough. I can reach them." "That is impossible. The levels in those corridors would kill you." "They would hurt me," Elena corrected. "They might kill me eventually, but I can survive long enough to reach the children and bring them back." Tellari's mouth opened and closed. He seemed unable to speak. Elena grabbed his arm. "Where are the emergency suits? The heavy ones for damage repair in hostile environments?" "Storage locker 7, down the hall. But those suits are only rated for short-term exposure. They won't protect you from that level of radiation. They'll protect me enough." Elena was already moving. "Get a medical team ready. The cubs will need treatment for heat exposure when I bring them out. And have someone standing by to open that bulkhead door when I get back." She found the storage locker and pulled out the heaviest suit she could find. It was designed for Velorai bodies, not human ones, but she forced herself into it anyway. The fit was wrong in a dozen places, but it would have to do. As she sealed the helmet, she heard a voice behind her. "Human." She turned. Cathari was standing there, looking at her with an expression she could not read. "You will die in there," he said. "You know this." Elena nodded. "Maybe, probably, but those children won't die. Not if I can help it." "Why?" His voice cracked on the word. "They are not your young. They are not even your species. Why would you give your life for them?" Elena thought about the question. She thought about all the reasons she could give. Duty, honor, the desire to prove that humans were not monsters. But in the end, the answer was simpler than all of that. "Because they're children," she said. "And they're scared. And they need someone to help them." She walked to the sealed bulkhead door. Behind her, she heard Cathari give the order to open it. The door slid up, and a wave of heat hit her like a physical blow. Even through the suit, she could feel it trying to cook her alive. The corridor beyond was filled with smoke and the red glow of emergency lights. Elena stepped through the door and into hell. Behind her, the bulkhead slammed shut. She was alone now. Alone with the fire and the radiation and the dying ship. 12 children were waiting for her. She started walking. The corridor was a tunnel of fire. Elena pushed forward, one step at a time, as the world around her tried to kill her. The temperature inside her suit was already climbing past what should have been safe. Her radiation counter was screaming, the numbers rising with every meter she traveled. The smoke was so thick that she could barely see 3 steps ahead, but she kept walking. The ship groaned around her like a wounded animal. Metal twisted and cracked. Sparks rained down from broken power lines. The floor beneath her feet was so hot that she could feel it through the thick boots of her suit. She passed bodies. Crew members who had been caught in the initial explosion, who had not made it to safety before the bulkhead sealed. She did not let herself look at their faces. She did not let herself think about them. There was nothing she could do for the dead. The living needed her. A section of the ceiling collapsed just ahead of her. Elena threw herself backward, barely avoiding the falling metal. Her suit tore along the left arm, and she felt the heat rush in against her skin. The pain was instant and terrible, but she forced herself to keep moving. The radiation was doing something to her. She could feel it, a deep sickness spreading through her body. Her head throbbed. Her stomach churned. Her vision blurred at the edges. She knew what this meant. She knew what the radiation was doing to her cells, her blood, her organs. She did not stop. The nursery deck was ahead. She could see the door through the smoke, still sealed, still intact. The room beyond it had been built strong, designed to protect the most precious members of the ship. The children were still alive in there. She had to believe that she reached the door and found the emergency release. Her fingers were shaking so badly that she could barely press the buttons. The suit had failed completely now, and her hands were burned and blistered. But she managed it. The door slid open. Inside, she found them. 12 cubs, huddled together in the center of the room. They had pushed all the furniture against the walls and gathered in a tight group, pressing close to each other for comfort. Their eyes were wide with terror. Their fur was damp with sweat. The temperature in the room was climbing fast. Not yet deadly, but getting worse with every minute. At the front of the group, protecting the younger ones, was Tila. The cub saw Elena and her eyes went wide. The human! The kind human came. Elena pulled off her damaged helmet. There was no point in keeping it on now. The suit was useless, and the children needed to see her face. I'm here, she said. Her voice was rough, damaged by the heat and smoke. I'm here to take you home. The cubs stared at her. She knew what she must look like. Burned and bleeding, her skin red and blistered, her eyes bloodshot from the radiation. She looked like a monster now, a creature from their worst nightmares. But Tilla ran to her without hesitation. I knew you'd come, the cub said, pressing against Elena's leg. I told them you would save us. Elena knelt down, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. She looked at the children, at their frightened faces and trembling bodies. Listen to me, she said. I know you're scared. I know I look scary right now, but I need you to trust me. I'm going to get you out of here, but you have to do exactly what I say. Can you do that? The cubs looked at each other. Then, one by one, they nodded. Good. Elena stood up and looked around the room. There were emergency blankets in a storage container near the wall. She grabbed them and wrapped the smallest cubs in the protective material. Then she picked up the 3 youngest, holding them against her chest. The rest of you, hold on to each other. Make a line. Don't let go, no matter what. Tala, you lead them. Follow right behind me. Yes, Elena, Tala said. Her voice was steady. She was being brave for the younger ones. They moved out into the corridor. The heat hit them immediately. The cubs whimpered, but they held on to each other and kept moving. Elena led them forward, searching for a path through the destruction. The way she had come was blocked now, collapsed metal filling the corridor. She would have to find another route. She remembered the ship's layout from the documents she had studied during her weeks of isolation. There was another path, longer, but still possible. She led the cubs through twisting corridors, around burning debris, past scenes of destruction that she shielded them from seeing. Her body was failing. She could feel it with every step. The radiation sickness was getting worse. Her burned skin screamed with pain. Her lungs were filling with fluid from the smoke she had breathed. But she kept moving, kept leading, kept protecting. A support beam groaned above them. Elena looked up and saw it beginning to fall. She did not think. She pushed the cubs behind her and caught the beam with her hands. The metal was hot enough to burn through her gloves in seconds. She felt the skin of her palms blister and crack. She heard herself scream, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the burning corridor. But she held the beam up. Go! She shouted. Run under it. Now, the cubs ran. 12 small bodies passed beneath the beam, while Elena held it with her ruined hands. Tella was the last, and she looked up at Elena with tears in her eyes. Don't die, the cub whispered. Please, don't die. Keep moving, Elena said through gritted teeth. I'm right behind you. She dropped the beam and stumbled after them. Her hands were destroyed now, burned beyond anything she had ever experienced. But she could still walk. She could still lead them. The safe section was close. She could see the bulkhead door ahead, still sealed but undamaged. Behind it was the escape pod bay, the medical team, safety. An explosion rocked the corridor. Elena spun around and saw fire rushing toward them, a wall of flame from a ruptured fuel line. There was no time to run, no time to escape. She threw herself over Tilla and two other cubs, wrapping her body around them like a shield. The fire washed over her, and she felt her back burning, her clothes catching fire, her skin charring. But the cubs beneath her were safe. When the fire passed, Elena could barely move. Her back was a mass of burns. Her body had been pushed past every limit. But she heard Tella crying beneath her, and she forced herself to move. "We're almost there," she whispered. "Just a little more." She stood up. The world spun around her, but she stayed on her feet. She picked up the cubs she had shielded and cradled them against her chest. "Everyone hold on," she said. "We're going home." She walked the last 50 meters on pure will. Her body had nothing left to give, but her spirit refused to stop. The cubs followed her, crying and trembling, but trusting her to save them. She reached the bulkhead door and pressed the emergency signal. The door opened. Light poured in from the safe section beyond. Elena saw Velorai faces staring at her, saw medical teams rushing forward, saw Kethari standing frozen with an expression of complete shock. 12 cubs, Elena said. Her voice was barely a whisper. All alive. All safe. Then her body finally gave out, and she collapsed to the floor. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Tella's face, looking down at her with tears streaming through silver fur. "She saved us," the cub was saying, over and over. "The humans saved us all." Then there was nothing but black. Elena drifted in darkness for a long time. She was aware, sometimes, of voices around her, of hands touching her body, of needles in her arms, of machines beeping and humming. She heard words in languages she did not understand, and words in her own language that did not make sense. Once, she thought she heard crying. Small voices, young voices calling her name. But mostly there was just the dark, and the silence, and the slow, difficult work of staying alive. She woke up on the 19th day. The first thing she saw was white. White ceiling, white walls, white sheets on the bed where she lay. The second thing she saw was machines, dozens of them, all connected to her body by tubes and wires. The third thing she saw was a Velorai cub sleeping in a chair beside her bed. Tilla. The small cub was curled up in the chair, wrapped in a blanket that Elena recognized. It was her jacket, the one she had given Tilla all those weeks ago, washed and mended and carried here. Elena tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She made a small sound, barely more than a breath, but Tella's ears twitched. The cub's eyes opened, and for a moment, she simply stared. Then she screamed with joy. "She's awake. Elena is awake. Someone come quick." The room filled with people. Doctors and nurses, both Velorai and human, rushed to check her vital signs and examine her wounds. Someone gave her water, small sips that felt like heaven on her burned throat. Someone else held her hand, and she realized with surprise that she could feel it. Her hands had been repaired, somehow rebuilt by technology she did not understand. Through it all, Tilla refused to leave her side. When the doctors finally finished and the room grew quiet, Elena looked at the cub and managed to smile. It hurt. Everything hurt. But she smiled anyway. "Hey there," she whispered. "Are you okay?" Tella's eyes filled with tears. "Am I okay? You almost died. You did die, for a little while. Your heart stopped 3 times. But I'm here now." Elena reached out with her bandaged hand and gently touched the cub's cheek. "I'm here." Tilla climbed onto the bed, careful not to touch any of the tubes or wires, and curled up against Elena's side. Her small body was warm and soft, and Elena felt tears running down her own face. "I told them," Tilla said. "I told everyone what you did. How you carried us through the fire. How you held up that beam even though it was burning you. How you covered us with your body when the explosion came." The cub looked up at her. "Everyone knows now. Everyone knows you saved us." Elena closed her eyes. She remembered the fire, the pain, the certain knowledge that she was going to die. She remembered thinking that it was worth it, that 12 children were worth everything she had to give. "I would do it again," she said softly. "For any of you. I would do it 1,000 times. Tilla pressed closer against her. "I know. That's what makes you special." The days that followed were filled with healing and visitors. The 12 cubs came to see her, one group at a time, each of them bringing small gifts. Drawings they had made, flowers from the ship's garden, a music recording of Velorai lullabies to help her sleep. They told her stories and sang her songs and sat with her when the pain was bad. Their parents came too. The same Velorai who had once crossed the corridor to avoid her now sat beside her bed and held her hand. They thanked her with tears in their eyes. They asked how they could ever repay her. They looked at her with something that Elena had never expected to see. Love. Pure, simple love. On the 25th day, Cathari came to visit. The ambassador looked older than Elena remembered. The events of the disaster had left their mark on him. His silver fur had patches of white now, and his eyes were tired. But when he looked at Elena, there was none of the old fear, none of the suspicion that had been there from the beginning. He sat in the chair beside her bed and was quiet for a long moment. "I need to apologize to you," he finally said. Elena shook her head. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do." He looked at his paws, then back at her. "From the moment you came aboard my ship, I treated you as a threat. I believed that you were dangerous, that you were hiding your true nature, that eventually you would show everyone what monsters humans really are." He paused. His voice was thick with emotion. "You did show us what humans really are, but not in the way I expected." Elena waited. "I watched you walk into those corridors," Cathari said. "I saw the readings. I knew what the radiation was doing to your body with every step. And I watched you keep going anyway. Not because you had to, not because anyone ordered you to, but because there were children in danger, and you could not let them die." He reached out and took her hand in both of his paws. "I have been a diplomat for 40 years. I have seen acts of courage and acts of cruelty from a dozen species. But I have never seen anything like what you did. You gave everything you had, everything you were, for children who were not yours. For children whose people had treated you with fear and suspicion from the moment you arrived." Tears were running down his face now, wetting his silver fur. "Why?" he asked, the same question he had asked before she walked into the fire. "Why did you do it?" Elena thought about the question. She thought about all the things she could say. She thought about humanity and their long, violent history. About the wars and weapons that had made the galaxy fear them. About the forward-facing eyes and the exposed teeth and everything else that made humans look like monsters. And she thought about the other side. The mothers who died protecting their children. The soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their friends. The strangers who ran into burning buildings to rescue people they had never met. The endless capacity for love and sacrifice that lived alongside humanity's capacity for violence. "Because that's what we are," she finally said. "All of us. Not just me. Every human you've ever feared has this inside them. The willingness to burn for someone else. The need to protect. It's the other side of what makes us dangerous. We love hard enough to die for it." Cathari was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up and bowed to her, the deepest bow a Velorai could give. "I will tell them," he said. I will tell the High Council, the Dominion, everyone who will listen. I will tell them what you did and what it means. I will tell them that we were wrong about your people." He walked to the door, then stopped and looked back. "The Cubs have started calling you something. A word in our language that does not translate well. It means something like the one who burns for others young. It is the highest honor we can give." Elena smiled, even though it hurt. "Tell them thank you. Tell them I'm honored." Cathari nodded and left. Elena lay back against her pillow and closed her eyes. She thought about the long journey ahead, the months of recovery, the return to Earth eventually, the stories that would be told about what happened here. She felt a small weight settle against her side. Tella had climbed back onto the bed, carrying her jacket with her. "Elena?" The cub said softly. "Yes? Can I stay with you?" "Not just now. When you go back to Earth, can I come with you?" Elena opened her eyes and looked at the small cub pressed against her side. At the large, dark eyes looking up at her with hope and love and trust. "I would like that," she said. "I would like that very much." Tella made a small sound of happiness and curled up closer. Outside the window, the stars burned on, endless and eternal. And somewhere among them, the story was spreading.